Scott and I have been buddies for about 10 years. Met each other fishing redfish tournaments. I ended up in a jam for a tournament one time. One of my partners couldn't fish, so I called Scott, and we ended up fishing together and became buddies and been friends ever since.
We used to compete against each other in tournaments and decided to get together and fish a few and had a great time doing it.
I talked to Scott on the phone a few weeks ago and got the idea that he still had a couple weeks of hunting season left at the time, and maybe it'd be fun to go get out in the woods and archery hunt and see what it was like. You know, I hunt in Florida all the time, so it was nice, you know, maybe get out of town, hunt Georgia and see what Georgia was about.
I had a buddy over in West Georgia who had some land that we could hunt, and I thought it'd be good to get out in the woods together since we hadn't seen each other in so long and do something a little different. I mean, we've done, you know, everything together in the fishing world, you know, as far as tournaments and just having fun fishing and everything else, but we've never hunted together, and I know that's a passion that he really has, and it was good to be able to get out in the woods and share that.
We were getting ready to leave town to head up to Georgia, and we started looking at the weather report, and it was calling for, you know, 90% chance of rain. It kind of had it spread out for first few days we were planning on being there. We contemplated maybe pushing it back. You know, that wasn't really that great of an option for us. We had a little window to do it, and we were already working with the very end of deer season. So we decided just to go ahead and roll with it and get up there, and if it was nasty weather, we'd spend that time doing something, hanging out, you know, sighting in the bows, maybe shoot some targets, go walk around the woods and scout or whatnot.
When we arrived over there, it was raining, and it had been raining for several days. So a lot of the sign, deer tracks, you know, anything that was on the ground was pretty much washed away. I mean, we were walking through ankle to almost knee-deep water into some of these hammocks and stuff, you know, just to look around. Aaron's a property owner. He and I met through our love of fishing. Aaron likes to offshore fish, and we got to know each other. He's a great guy. He's a farmer over in West Georgia.
It was basically a tract of land, maybe 750 acres, I think, that was primarily blueberries, cotton, and wheat fields, and with some planted pine hammocks and cypress hammocks and oak hammocks. So kind of a typical Georgia farm, you know, in an area with a bunch of other farmland that people did hunt. This is where he said they've been coming out and coming down this edge. And then see this trail through here? Yeah. And we also got this big prairie looking deal through here. This is what I was thinking is like, maybe I would sit like on this point this evening or on this point, so the wind's coming in my face a little bit and the sun's gonna set like over here. Yeah. So we'd have a little bit of shadow and just see where the deer are coming in and out, you know, and we might have to move our stands tonight or something. But then I was thinking about, this is that head that's like cypress. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking about having you maybe on this point here so you can see all the way down this edge, and you got a main trail coming out of here, and they might walk this edge, and you can see all the way down here. See what I'm saying? Yeah. So you can kind of see to where I can't, and I can see this way. Yeah. So I think right now what we ought to do, we're right here, I think we ought to just come right back up here, walk down this trail to this field, see what that looks like, come back out, and maybe dump a couple stands here, and then come down, set up a couple stands here or a couple stands here. We only have one ladder, 2 lock-ons. Some of these trees we're not gonna be able to climb. Yeah. So let's use the climbers where we can. Like these big cypress, we can put climbers on. Yeah. So let's go back and just take a walk around this, and then drive down here and just figure out where we want to put stands for the night. Let's do it. All right. Where they're coming in and out, where they're going to, so that if we have to move the stands, we know where we should move them to. Get it right down to your body or something. See how they're walking this edge. I'm coming right down. They like to sit right in that smart stuff, like all these little pines. They got like these little pine trees. That's where they like to bed. Yeah. Sure enough, we got up there and it had been raining for a few days, and it was kind of rainy and drizzly the first day we were there. And that had a little bit of effect on what we could do to scout. You know, on one hand, it removed any sign of where deer were using trails and stuff habitually. But at the same time, once that weather kind of cleared out and the animals would start to move again, we knew that any tracks we would see at that point were recent and were fresh. So it did enable us to, kind of figure out, once we saw some deer tracks, that these were indeed within the last 12 hours or whatnot when we were there the last time.
Wild Instinct Outdoors is in partnership with Ray Marine. Go hunting underwater with Ray Marine.
We would get in and we basically scouted the entire time, through the entire hunt. We would do so carrying a bow in case we saw an animal and might turn a scout into a spot and stalk. But it was really kind of figuring out and eliminating area, and eliminating possibilities of where we thought the game would be or where the game was moving, and trying to narrow it down to what our best opportunity would be to harvest an animal. We figured out that our best option was to hang stands. We didn't see anything. We'd relocate those stands, hang stands again, and just sit and listen and watch and see if we could figure out what our best options were.
I think I hunted 5 different spots in 3 days. So we did a lot of moving around on a fairly small piece of land. I mean, 750 acres sounds like a lot of property until you really start moving around on it, and it gets real small real fast.
Going into the hunt, we really weren't dead set on just targeting bucks or whatever. Obviously, it'd be great if a great big, 150-inch buck walked out, but chances of that happening in a few days on property we've never been to, might as well go play the lottery. So it was kind of, we kind of basically said we'd sit and see what we could find, and if a decent doe even walked out, we would harvest that for sure and get us some meat for the end of season. And we were real open to what we were going to harvest. We thought maybe possibility of seeing hogs or a possibility of seeing some does, and if we got lucky and had a buck walk out, that'd be great, but it was definitely not riding on that.
We had picked this spot. It was beautiful. I mean, it was right in this fork. There was a nice open area, a lot of rubs. We decided where to put the stand. I went back out to the road, got in the truck, and we went off for lunch and came back in the afternoon, and I pull up and start unloading stuff and look down, there's deer tracks all over the place in the road. So we kind of retracked that area back to where the deer had come out of the woods and decided to set up shop right there. And so we just changed our game plan altogether. And that was in the evening. We hunted, and we definitely heard some deer moving around in the swamp behind us, but we really didn't see anything. But we decided we really wanted to hunt it in the morning, because those tracks were obviously from that morning that we saw. And the next morning we got up, and I don't know, we weren't in the stand, probably 30 minutes after daybreak, and had a nice doe coming down the trail, and I could see her coming, and waited. She walked right out, just as all the tracks, and she was following basically those tracks right out the same direction she had come from, or they had come from the day before. And I decided, since it was the last day of season, to just go ahead and take a shot on her.
It's the last day of the season, and the weather's been really tough. We hadn't seen a whole lot of deer, but I wanted to go ahead and get a shot really early. That's a pretty good doe. She walked right out into the field, out of the thicket behind us, and I took a shot. She's down. I can actually see her just behind these pines.
When you spend as much time on the water as I do, it's just great to be in the woods. I mean, I spend 250, 300 days a year on the water. So the woods are almost foreign to me now. And so I went out with the expectations, more than anything, is just to experience some wildlife, and it's one of those things where, I decided to do that because, one, I love to eat, venison, and I had a little bit in the freezer that somebody had given me, but I really made the decision that it would be nice to harvest my own deer and to go through that whole process. Just knowing that I harvested that deer and knowing that I would enjoy it that much better and preparing it to eat and everything. So no, I really didn't go in with the expectations to kill anything. If a big buck would have walked out, I would have loved to have taken a shot on it, but I feel just as happy, you know, harvesting that doe as I do, you know, harvesting a buck. I know there's plenty of bucks on the property, and it gives me something to look forward to next year.
Wild Instinct Outdoors is in partnership with Hooters, the cure for the common restaurant. The American Barrels, live free or die, a true American spirit.
We had found an area that we could tell had some deer movement recently since the front had gone through, and we hung some stands in this oak hammock on the edge of really wet cypress swamp. We had a few days of no success as far as even seeing much in the way of animals moving, but that's a big part of it, and that's just as much fun and just as cool. That's what makes it a challenge sometimes, you know? I mean, if you could just walk out and climb up in a stand and harvest a deer every time, it kind of takes the challenge away from it, takes the fun away from it. You know, it's not just about going out and killing. It's about being out there, and it's about honing your senses and becoming a better outdoorsman, and those tough days are what do that. So we got in early in the morning. We're sitting there waiting for, you know, it to get light out, and literally freezing and shaking. You know, our Florida boys aren't used to a little bit of weather. You know, it's 40 degrees and we're up there trembling in the stands. And Scott had sent me a text that he had harvested a deer, that he had shot one, and you know, I was like, that's great, you know, congrats. So we knew we had one, and kind of helped with us giving me a feeling that we were doing something right, because we had him set up on the edge of a swamp, and we were in a very similar area. So I'm up in the stand in a climber, have Kevin, the producers, on the same tree as me, and we've got a north wind at like 15 miles an hour, and we're both sitting up in the tree stand just shivering and completely freezing, you know. Sitting there, and we heard a noise off kind of over my right shoulder behind me a little bit. You know, wasn't real sure what we heard. We didn't hear anything coming through the water. And so I stood up, knocked an arrow, and stood up and put my release on the bow, and I'm standing there on the stand. I'm literally just shaking. I'm so cold. And sure enough, we had a nice doe kind of make her way through the trees at I don't know, 30 yards from us, and she came by and stopped, and never, once she came out, by the time I saw her, I never really had like anywhere where she went behind trees or anything for me to draw. And she comes out, and I went to draw one time, and I don't know if it was so cold or what, but I went to draw, and I got about halfway back, and she looked up, and I'm kind of locked up, and I had to come off, and she stood there looking at me and knew something wasn't right, but took a couple more steps to where she got behind a little bush, enabled me to come to full draw. And I stood there for what seemed like a few minutes, which was probably only a few seconds at draw, but she stood there completely covered up, and I was at full draw, and then she decided she wasn't going to keep going. Something was definitely not right where we were. I don't know if she winded us or if she could just tell, you know, she could sense us. And so she turned back around to go out the way she came in, and took a few steps out, and I was able to send one her way and connect with her.
She's not that big, but I'll take her. Crazy.
Wild Instinct Outdoors is in partnership with XS Sight Systems, the fastest sights in any light. Boatmaster Trailers, the name that represents quality.
To me, I like the tracking almost as much as the hunt itself. You know, it really is. It's really a big part of it. It's cool. It's like it makes you be very methodical in how you go about it, and if at all possible, I will literally go connect the dots from one drop of blood to the next, or one broken twig or one overturned rock to the next in order to find the animal. Sometimes that's not possible. We're hunting right up against swamp where literally 80% of it was, you know, shin deep water. So it made the tracking extremely tricky. We were able to see some blood. We knew we had good blood, and we could hear her in what direction we thought she went. But in the woods and in the trees, that can be real deceiving. Sounds bounce off of things, and you know, I've seen it where you think an animal goes one way, and in actuality, they end up, you know, 90 degrees off in a different direction. So we had to really go over the areas that were exposed ground, where we could see some blood, very carefully. And then when we got into areas of water, we had to do everything from looking at kind of the pollen and film on top of the water to see if it had been disturbed in any certain direction or areas, to see if you could tell where something had moved through, to looking for bubbles on the water surface where something might have stepped through, broken twigs and limbs, and even used my Raymarine infrared, handheld infrared camera to try and see heat signatures and look through that swamp and help us anything stand out.
He was using something I'd never seen before, Raymarine FLIR, which was pretty interesting. It's a thermal imager, and it's one of those things most hunters would never think about using something like that. But the swamp was the biggest issue we had to overcome, because it was all water. I mean, we spent half the day walking through water there. And so it's really hard to track a deer, a blood trail, especially in water. And so you're able to see, you know, see heat signatures with this thing. And ultimately we found the deer with the heat signature, you know, his deer off of that Raymarine FLIR.
Nice.
Little food at the end of the season?
Yeah, last day, man. Last day.
We hunt, you know, for food, to eat what we harvest. You know, it's not just about harvesting a trophy or something with great big antlers. It's about being in the woods. It's about, you know, experiencing new areas and being out there with friends and learning something new and whatnot. So for us to harvest a doe and get some, you know, fresh venison at the end of the season is just as good as harvesting some big trophy buck, you know.
Meeting the crew and getting to spend time with Chris again in the woods, without a doubt, is the best part of the experience for me. I do a lot of flats fishing and building relationships with my clients that I've been fishing for 15 years, some of them, is great. And I spend more time with those people than I do with some of my best friends. And so being able to get out there and have a good time with friends and just laugh and carry on and do all that is just, it's really what it's all about. You know, it's not about getting out there and, you know, it's not about killing and catching. It's about the whole experience, and a big part of that is the camaraderie and friendships that are developed and built and maintained, you know, throughout the years.
It never fails that we meet different people from different walks of life, that because of a common interest or because of people you know through the outdoors. And it's always like, you know, everybody's always so generous and willing to, you know, share what they have with you and wanting to, you know, talk about what your experiences are and tell stories and whatnot. And so in this case, Scott had, you know, hey, my buddy Aaron's got this farm. You know, we got back after he just basically turned over his land to us and said, have a good time, and rolled back into his house, which is 100-year-old Georgia house, you know, on the side of a pecan orchard. And we get back in, he's got a fire going, he's got a grill fired up with steaks on it, and just wanted to, you know, make sure that anything he could do to have us enjoy our time there. And it was just super, super cool. You know, his hospitality was off the chart. We had a few more days that we figured we could stay in Georgia, and hunting season was over. We harvested a couple great does and decided that, you know, we're 150 miles or so from the coast where Scott lives, And we started looking at the weather, and it was clearing. It looked like the next day or so was going to be actually the first bit of sun that had shined on the area in over a week or so. So we decided we might as well pack up and head back towards the coast and see if we could get a little fishing in.